I've always hated my sister's attitude, but this time, she crossed a line. It was supposed to be the best birthday I'd had in years. The cake was perfect, the decorations were on point, and everything was going according to plan. That is, until my sister, Lila, decided to ruin it, like she always does. It's like she takes some twisted pleasure in making my life harder. Growing up, I'd always been the one who had to keep my head down, make sure everyone else was happy. Leela, on the other hand, was the star, the one who got all the attention, the one who was always in the spotlight, and for the longest time I just accepted it. But not this time. This time was different. My birthday was supposed to be mine. Finally, a day where I didn't have to play second fiddle to her. I had planned everything out perfectly. My friends were all coming over. We had a fancy cake made with the perfect mix of frosting and layers that I'd been dreaming about for months, and I was excited to finally have a day where I could just relax, enjoy myself, and not have to worry about anything. The party was in full swing, and everything was perfect. But then, just as I was about to cut the cake and make a wish, I felt someone at my back. I didn't even have to turn around to know it was her. Lila had this way of showing up at the most inconvenient moments, and today was no different. "Are you really going to eat all of that, Nova?" she sneered. Her voice had this mocking tone, the kind that made my stomach twist. I could feel my blood start to boil, but I didn't want to let her ruin my mood. I was determined to enjoy my birthday. I smiled, ignoring her, and cut the first slice of cake. That's when she did it. Before I could even take my first bite, Lila grabbed a piece of the cake and smashed it right into my face. The room went silent. For a second, everything froze. I was covered in cake, frosting dripping down my cheeks. My friends were stunned. My mom was laughing awkwardly in the corner, and I was just frozen. I wiped the cake off my face, trying to hold back the anger that was threatening to boil over. I knew this was coming. Every year, without fail, she found some way to ruin my birthday. But this time, I was done. Instead of screaming, instead of crying, I stood there, wiping the frosting from my eyes with a steady hand. My heart was racing, but I had something she didn't: control. "I should have known better than to expect anything different from you," I said, my voice low but full of venom. Lila's smile faltered just for a second, but she quickly covered it with a laugh. "Oh, come on, Nova, it's just cake," she said, as if it was no big deal. But I wasn't going to let her walk away this time. Not without consequences. I smiled back at her, but it wasn't the kind of smile I'd ever given her before. "You know, Lila," I said, wiping the last bit of frosting off my cheek, "you've made a big mistake." And for the first time in years, I wasn't backing down. The game was on, and she had no idea what was coming next. The room was still awkwardly silent after my words. My friends exchanged glances, clearly unsure of what was about to happen. And my mom was just standing there, awkwardly shifting between looking at me and looking at Lila, unsure if she should intervene. But I wasn't going to let this slide. Not this time. I had been the one who always kept the peace, the one who avoided confrontation, and for once, I wasn't going to sit back and let Lila ruin my day. I could see the smirk on her face, like she thought she had won, like this was just another game she was playing with me, and I was the punchline. But what she didn't realize was that I was done being the punchline. I was done letting her control every situation, making everything about her, while I was left to pick up the pieces. "Did you really think I'd let this go?" I said, my voice much steadier now, even though my heart was still pounding with a mix of anger and excitement. Lila raised an eyebrow, clearly trying to play it cool, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She hadn't expected me to snap like this. "Oh, please, Nova," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's just a stupid birthday cake. You're overreacting." "You always do this, don't you?" I asked, keeping my voice controlled, but every word was heavy with meaning. "You ruin everything, and when people call you out on it, you pretend it's no big deal." Well, I'm not pretending anymore. I was standing tall now, no longer the quiet, meek sister who just let things slide. I was tired of her treating me like this. I was tired of being the one who never got the chance to speak up, the one who was always overshadowed, always overlooked. This was my moment, my birthday, and I wasn't going to let her ruin it, not without giving her a taste of her own medicine. I turned to my friends, who were still standing in stunned silence, not knowing what to say. "You know, I had this whole party planned," I said, my voice calm but tinged with sarcasm. "I thought it was going to be great, until Lila decided to make it about her, as usual." They laughed awkwardly, still unsure whether they should be supporting me or trying to keep the peace. But I wasn't worried about them. This wasn't about anyone else. It was about me. And for the first time, I wasn't going to let Lila ruin my moment. I turned back to her, my eyes narrowing. "You really think you can just do whatever you want and everyone will forgive you? Well, guess what, Lila? Not this time. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you did." Her smirk faltered, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. She wasn't used to being called out like this. She wasn't used to anyone standing up to her. But I was done being afraid of her. I wasn't going to let her bully me into silence anymore. "You think you can just embarrass me and walk away unscathed?" I continued, my voice growing colder. "Not today." And that's when the idea hit me. A perfect revenge. Something so sweet, so simple, and so fitting. I had always been the one to take the high road, to rise above the drama. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't just going to get back at her. I was going to outdo her, outshine her in front of everyone. I was going to turn her own game against her. I excused myself from the living room, walking calmly to the kitchen. I had a plan, and it wasn't going to take long. I knew exactly what I needed to do. When I returned, I had a fresh, beautiful, untouched birthday cake in my hands. The frosting was smooth and perfect, the decorations pristine, and the look on Lila's face? Priceless. She hadn't expected me to have another cake, let alone one even more beautiful than the first. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. I smiled sweetly, holding the cake up for everyone to see. "Oh, don't worry, Lila. I've got it covered. You may have destroyed the first one, but I'm going to make sure the second one is perfect, just like the party should have been." She stood there, speechless, and for the first time, I could see the tension in her shoulders. The smug, confident girl I'd always known was suddenly looking nervous, unsure of how to respond. I wasn't just getting my revenge. I was taking back control. I placed the new cake on the table, right in front of her, and then, with a smirk on my face, I picked up the cake knife. "Go ahead," I said, turning to her with a mock-sweet smile. "Why don't you cut the first slice, since you seem to enjoy destroying things so much?" The room went quiet again, everyone waiting for her reaction. She could have refused, could have walked away, but I knew her too well. She wouldn't let me win. She'd never back down, and that's exactly what I was counting on. With a mixture of frustration and fury, Lila grabbed the knife, cutting into the cake. The tension in the room was palpable, but I didn't care. This was my moment. I wasn't backing down anymore. And as she cut the first slice, I knew I had won. "You've made a mistake, Lila," I said, my voice full of quiet satisfaction. "You've always thought you could get away with everything, but not anymore." As she placed the slice on her plate, I realized something. I wasn't just getting back at her. I was finally standing up for myself, showing her that I didn't need to play by her rules anymore. The game had changed, and I was the one in control now. The night was far from over, but as I stood there, watching Lila squirm, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. Finally, I had the last laugh. The atmosphere in the room was electric, charged with tension and disbelief. Lila stood there, her hand still gripping the cake knife, her face a mixture of anger and shock. She had never expected me to react this way. After all, she was the one who always had the power, always the one who got her way. But now I was the one calling the shots. And the sweet irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Lila's eyes flickered between the cake in her hands and my unshaken expression. She opened her mouth to say something, probably another one of her snarky comments, but then she closed it, unsure of how to respond. For once, the power dynamic had shifted. She had no words, no comeback. It was almost as if she couldn't understand what had just happened. "You know, Lila," I said, my voice steady and dripping with sarcasm, "I really thought this was going to be my birthday. But I guess you couldn't let me have one thing to myself, could you?" Her face flushed, and she finally set the knife down, her hands trembling just slightly. It was a small victory, but it felt like a monumental shift. I could feel the weight of all the years of frustration, the years of being ignored, finally lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, I felt seen, not just as the background character in our family's drama, but as someone who deserved to be heard.
"I don't know what your problem is, but I'm not letting you ruin my night," she snapped, her voice low and tight, like she was holding back from completely losing it. "Oh, trust me, Lila," I said, holding back a smile. "You already ruined it, but I'm still going to make the best of it. I'm not going to let you take that away from me, too." I wasn't just talking about the cake or the party. I was talking about something deeper. For so long, I had let her walk all over me, let her take the spotlight and take what should have been mine. But now? Now I was taking it all back, every single bit of it. The party resumed, but the energy had changed. My friends were looking at me differently now. There was a new respect in their eyes. They had seen me stand up to Lila, seen me take control of my own celebration. I wasn't the quiet, invisible girl anymore. I was Nova, the girl who had finally fought back, and I could tell they were starting to realize that. Lila, on the other hand, was sulking in the corner. She was trying to act like nothing had happened, but the redness in her cheeks and the tension in her shoulders betrayed her. She was trying to pretend she hadn't just been put in her place, but we both knew the truth. I had won. Not just this battle, but the whole war that had been waging in the background for years. As the night went on, I noticed Lila glancing over at me every now and then. She was trying to keep up her usual act, but I could see the cracks forming. She had always been the center of attention, the one who made the rules and expected everyone to fall in line. But now she was starting to realize that things had changed. The people in the room were no longer just watching her. They were watching me. At one point, Lila came over to where I was standing, clearly attempting to salvage whatever dignity she had left. "Look, Nova," she began, her voice lower than usual. "I didn't mean to ruin your birthday. I don't know what's gotten into me lately. Can we just forget about it?" I looked at her, my expression unreadable. For a moment, I considered forgiving her, considered letting this go the way I always had before. But then I remembered everything. All the years of being overshadowed, of letting her treat me like I was invisible. I couldn't just let her off the hook this time. "I don't know, Lila," I said, my voice steady. "You've been doing this for years, and every time I try to let it slide, it gets worse. But tonight was different. I'm not going to pretend like it didn't happen. You crossed the line. And for once, I'm not going to just forgive and forget." Her face fell, the reality of what she had done sinking in. I could see her trying to fight back the frustration, trying to find the words that would make everything go back to the way it was before. But it was too late. She had lost that power. She had lost the ability to manipulate me into staying quiet, to make me feel small. "I'm sorry," she muttered, but I could tell it wasn't heartfelt. It was more of a way to get herself out of the situation, to try and regain control, but I wasn't falling for it. "I know you are," I said, my voice calm, "but that doesn't change what happened. You can apologize all you want, but I'll never forget what you did." She didn't respond to that. Instead, she turned and walked away, her head low, her pride wounded. And for the first time, I felt no need to chase after her. I wasn't going to chase after anyone who didn't respect me. The rest of the night went on without incident, and as the party came to an end, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had taken control. I had shown her and everyone else that I wasn't going to sit back and let them walk all over me anymore. When I sat down later that night, looking over the party photos, I felt a small smile tug at the corners of my mouth. This birthday wasn't the one I had planned, but it had turned out to be the best one yet. Not because of the cake, not because of the presents, but because I had finally stood up for myself, and that made all the difference. For the first time, I wasn't the girl who let others ruin her day. I was the girl who took her life back, piece by piece, and nothing could take that from me. The days after my birthday were filled with a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. The party had been messy, but it had been a turning point for me. I wasn't the same person who had quietly let Lila control every situation. I had made a stand, and that gave me a strength I hadn't realized I was capable of. But even though I was feeling victorious, I knew that this wasn't the end of things. Lila wasn't going to just forget about the way I had humiliated her in front of everyone. She didn't take well to being outshined, and she definitely didn't like it when she wasn't the center of attention. I had expected her to come after me, to try to make me regret standing up for myself, but what surprised me was the way she handled it, or rather the way she didn't handle it. A few days after the party, Lila sent me a message. It wasn't the usual snarky text or passive-aggressive jab she normally would have sent. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk." At first I hesitated. I knew this could go one of two ways. Either she'd try to apologize and make things right, or she'd try to manipulate me into feeling guilty for what had happened. But I wasn't backing down. I had already told her how I felt. I wasn't going to let her try to twist things around. So, I responded, "Fine. What do you want to talk about?" She asked me to meet at a cafe, a neutral spot. I agreed. I wasn't about to let this drag on, and I knew it was time for us to have a real conversation, one that didn't involve her trying to play me like she always did. When I arrived, I saw her sitting at a corner table, staring at her phone, not even bothering to look up when I walked in. For a moment, I debated just turning around and walking out, but I had come this far, and I wasn't about to back down now. I walked over to the table, and she finally looked up, her face a mask of indifference. There was no smile, no apology, just that same smug look she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. What's this about, Lila? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I thought we were done with the games. She let out a sigh, clearly annoyed. Look, Nova, I know I screwed up. I shouldn't have done what I did at the party. It was childish, and I get that. But you have to understand, I've always been the one who gets attention. You've never had to fight for anything. You've always been the quiet one, doing what you're told, staying out of the way. I didn't say anything at first. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her exactly what I thought of her self-centered attitude. But I stayed calm, waiting for her to continue. I don't know what's gotten into you lately, she went on, but I'm not going to lie. I've always resented how you've just let everyone walk all over you. It's like you're fine being in the background, and I don't know why it bothers me so much now, but it does. I could feel my patience wearing thin. So what, now you want to fix things by telling me it's my fault for not fighting for attention all these years? Is that it? She didn't seem to know how to respond to that. There was a pause before she spoke again, but this time her voice was softer, almost vulnerable. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I didn't realize how much I was taking from you. I didn't see it. I didn't see how much you were always doing for the family, for me. And maybe I took you for granted. I blinked, not sure if I had heard her correctly. This was a side of Lila I had never seen before. She had never admitted to anything in the past. And now, it seemed like she was genuinely acknowledging the truth, at least some of it. I don't know how to fix things, she said quietly, looking at the table rather than me. But I don't want things to stay the way they are between us. I'm sorry, Nova. I sat there, stunned into silence. I had expected her to turn this conversation into a fight, to make excuses for what she had done. But instead she was apologizing. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't a complete acknowledgement of everything she'd done to me over the years, but it was something. I wasn't sure what to say. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. The tough, untouchable exterior she had built up her entire life was cracking, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as confident as she had always appeared. I took a deep breath. You've done a lot of damage, Lila, and I don't know if we can just forget everything, but I appreciate you saying that. I don't know where we go from here, but this is a start. She nodded, and for the first time, I could see a small flicker of genuine emotion behind her eyes. It wasn't the same old Lila who tried to get away with everything. She seemed like she was truly trying to change. I don't expect everything to go back to normal, she said, her voice sincere. But I want to try. I don't want to keep fighting. You're my sister, and I've never seen that until now. I could feel the tension between us start to lift. It wasn't an instant fix. The years of resentment, the games, the rivalry, those things couldn't be undone in one conversation. But I realized something important. This wasn't just about her. It was about me, too. About how I had allowed myself to be pushed aside for so long. How I had played the role of the obedient, invisible daughter. It wasn't enough anymore. But this conversation, this small moment of vulnerability from Lila, gave me hope. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress.
As we finished our coffee and parted ways, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of peace. I wasn't done with Lila, but for the first time, I felt like we might be able to move forward together. I had fought for myself. I had stood up to her. And in the end, maybe that was all that mattered. The next few days felt strangely different. After my talk with Lila, I had this lingering sense of cautious optimism. I wasn't naive enough to think everything would magically get better overnight. But there was a shift in the air, a quiet tension, followed by something almost like relief. Lila had apologized. That was unexpected, but I knew the road to healing wouldn't be smooth or easy. Old habits die hard, and I wasn't about to let my guard down just yet. I spent the next few days reflecting on what had happened. It wasn't just the cake or the birthday. It wasn't even about her childish behavior. It was about something bigger. The years of resentment and frustration that had built up inside me. For the longest time, I had just let it slide, convinced that keeping the peace was the only way to avoid conflict. But that night, everything changed. I had finally learned how to stand up for myself, and no matter how messy it had gotten, I knew I couldn't go back to being that quiet, invisible sister. But there was still a part of me that wondered if this was just a phase for Lila. Would she go back to her old ways? Was this real? Or was it just a temporary moment of vulnerability? I had to be honest with myself. Lila hadn't changed overnight. And even though I appreciated her apology, I wasn't going to put all my trust in it right away. I was learning to be more careful with my expectations. A couple of days later, I got a text from Lila. It was brief, just a simple, "Hey, are you free this weekend? Can we hang out?" At first, I didn't know how to respond. The old me would have jumped at the chance, eager to make peace, to patch things up quickly. But the new me? I was more cautious. I wasn't going to jump into anything without knowing where we stood. I sat with the message for a while, debating whether I should respond or just let it go. Eventually, I decided to reply. "Sure, we can hang out. But let's be real this time, Lila. No games, no pretending." I sent the message and immediately felt a mix of anxiety and relief. This was a new kind of conversation for us, one that wasn't built on hidden grudges or passive-aggressive behavior. This was me setting boundaries. This was me taking control of the situation, and that felt good. When the weekend arrived, Lila and I met at a cafe we used to visit when we were younger. It was a neutral space, far removed from all the family drama, and I thought it would be a good place to have a real conversation. I was nervous, but I didn't show it. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore, but I also wasn't going to turn my back on her just because of one bad incident. When she sat down across from me, she looked different, softer, maybe even a little unsure. She wasn't the same confident, entitled sister I had grown up with. The girl who thought she could take whatever she wanted and get away with it. This was a more vulnerable version of Lila. And even though I still didn't completely trust her, I knew it was time to try and see her as more than just the girl who always got her way. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, her voice tentative. "I know things have been weird, but I want to make things right." I nodded, but didn't say anything right away. I wasn't in the mood for more empty words. "Lila, I've been thinking a lot about everything. I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt. It did. But I also know that this is about more than just the birthday cake. This is about years of being pushed aside, of feeling like I was never enough. And I'm not going to keep pretending like that's okay." She looked down at her coffee, biting her lip. "I know. I get it. And I'm sorry. I really am. I never realized how much I was taking from you, Nova. I guess I've been so caught up in my own world that I didn't see how much you were doing, how much you were sacrificing just to make everyone happy. I took it all for granted." I wasn't sure how to respond. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me, and part of me wanted to believe her. but I had been burned too many times before. I couldn't just forget everything that had happened in the past. Not yet. I appreciate you saying that, I said, my voice steady but firm. But words are just words, Leela. I need to see action. I need to know that you're not going to keep treating me like I'm invisible, like I don't matter. She nodded, her eyes sincere. I understand, and I promise I'm going to do better. I know it's going to take time, but I want to change. I want us to have a real relationship, one that's not built on me trying to control everything. I wasn't sure if I was ready to fully trust her, but I realized something important. I didn't need to rush this. I didn't need to give her all my trust in one conversation. What mattered was that she was willing to try. And for the first time, I could see that she was willing to put in the work. I'm not going to let you walk all over me again, Lila. But I'm willing to try too, I said, my voice softening just a little. Let's start over. No more games, no more pretending. Let's be real with each other. For the first time, I saw a real smile on her face, not the fake, manipulative grin she usually wore. It was a small step, but it was progress. As we sat there, sipping our coffee and talking like we hadn't in years, I realized something. This wasn't just about mending our relationship. It was about me learning to stand up for myself, to take control of my own life. I wasn't the quiet, passive sister anymore. I was Nova, the sister who had learned to fight for what she deserved, and I wasn't going to stop now. This wasn't the end of the story. It wasn't even the beginning of the end. But it was a start. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. The next few weeks were a turning point. After my conversation with Lila, things didn't magically change overnight, but I could feel the atmosphere in our house shift. For the first time, it felt like we were starting to have a real relationship. Not the toxic, one-sided one we had always had, but something that was based on respect. And as much as I had my doubts, I also felt a strange sense of peace knowing that I wasn't just pretending everything was okay anymore. I had finally stood up for myself, and the world hadn't collapsed around me. But even though things were different, I wasn't foolish enough to believe that Lila's apology meant everything was fixed. I knew that the process of change would take time, and though I had to give her credit for trying, I wasn't going to let my guard down completely. There was a part of me that still remembered all the times she had taken advantage of me, all the moments when I had been forced to play second fiddle. I couldn't just erase all of that with a single conversation. It had to take time, and it had to be earned. As the days went by, I started to notice small changes. Lila wasn't as quick to make snide comments, and she was starting to include me in more of the family activities. There was a real effort on her part to make amends. For once, she wasn't just the girl who assumed she could get whatever she wanted, but there was still something in me that was cautious. I wasn't ready to trust her fully. I couldn't afford to. Not yet. One evening, as we were all sitting down for dinner, something shifted again. My mom had been watching us more closely than usual, observing the subtle changes in our interactions. I could see her smile as she noticed Lila being kinder to me, but there was also a certain hesitancy in her eyes. I could tell she was waiting for the moment when things would go back to normal, waiting for Lila to slip back into her old habits. But that wasn't going to happen. Not on my watch. Lila looked over at me from across the table, a small, almost shy smile on her face. "Hey, Nova," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I was thinking maybe we could go shopping this weekend, just the two of us?" I raised an eyebrow, unsure of how to respond. The idea of spending time alone with her still made me nervous, but I also knew that this was her way of trying to rebuild what we had lost. So I nodded slowly. Sure, we can do that. For a moment, there was a palpable tension in the room. My dad glanced between Lila and me, his expression uncertain. My mom looked at me, waiting for my reaction. But I wasn't about to turn down the opportunity to give my sister a chance to prove she had changed. I knew it wouldn't be perfect, but I was willing to take this small step. After all, nothing worth having ever came without effort. Saturday morning came, and I met Lila at the shopping mall. I didn't know what to expect, but as we walked through the doors, I felt a strange sense of unease mixed with hope. I was still unsure of how this was going to go, but for the first time, I decided to just let things unfold. I wasn't going to hold on to all the hurt I had carried for so long. I was ready to see if we could start fresh. But I also knew that this time, I wasn't going to let her push me around again. So, what's the plan? I asked, looking around at the store displays. I don't know, Lila said, her voice a little too casual. I was just thinking we could maybe look for some new outfits. For you. You know, something that makes you feel, I don't know, special. It wasn't exactly the most heartfelt thing she could have said, but it was a start. And as we spent the next couple of hours trying on clothes and chatting about anything and everything, I realized something. Maybe Lila wasn't perfect. Maybe she still had a long way to go. But so did I. I wasn't perfect either, and I had spent so much time holding on to the past, holding on to all the resentment and anger. But now I had a choice. I could either keep holding on to that anger or let it go and start fresh. By the time we were done, I found myself laughing. Actually, laughing. Something that, up until this point, felt so foreign when it came to Lila. The weight of everything that had happened between us still lingered, but it didn't feel like it had to define us anymore. We sat down at a coffee shop for a break, and Lila looked at me for a moment like she was trying to find the right words. Finally, she spoke. Nova, I know I've messed up a lot. I know I haven't been the best sister, but I want you to know that I'm really trying to change. I know I can't make up for everything, but I'm trying, and I hope you can give me a chance. I looked at her for a long moment, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. For the first time, I felt like she wasn't just saying the words because she thought they were what I wanted to hear. She was saying them because she meant them. I know, Lila, I said, taking a deep breath. I'm not saying everything is going to be easy. It's going to take time, but I think we can start over. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't just giving her a chance. I was giving myself a chance to heal, to let go of the hurt, and to build a relationship that wasn't built on resentment or old grudges. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally let go of the past. As we left the mall, I couldn't help but smile. The night I'd fought for, the birthday I had taken back, had been a turning point. Not just for me, but for my relationship with Lila. We still had a long road ahead, but at least we were on the same path now. And that was more than enough for me. The weeks that followed that day were filled with small but significant changes. Lila and I weren't suddenly best friends, but we were learning how to exist in each other's space without the constant tension that had been there for so long. We didn't always agree, and things weren't always smooth, but I began to realize something important. Sometimes it's not about having a perfect relationship. It's about taking those small steps to make it better, to move forward rather than being stuck in the past. It wasn't just about forgiving Lila. though that was part of it. It was about me learning to forgive myself too. For years, I had held on to so much anger and resentment, allowing it to control how I saw not just Lila, but the entire situation. I had let those feelings define who I was, and it took me standing up for myself that night at the party to realize I didn't need to carry that burden anymore. The power was in my hands to decide how I wanted to move forward, how I wanted to shape my own story. Lila and I went shopping a few more times after that, sometimes for new clothes, sometimes just to hang out. We talked, we laughed, and we even started reminiscing about the good old days, the days before things got complicated. It wasn't easy, and we still had our moments where old habits resurfaced, but we were both trying. We were both learning, and that meant more to me than anything else. One afternoon, as we sat on the couch together watching a movie, something shifted. We didn't need to say much, but I could feel the change between us. There was no longer the awkwardness, no more feeling like I was being forced into a role I didn't want. We were just sisters, in the truest sense of the word. "I'm really glad things are different now," Lila said quietly, her eyes glued to the screen, but her voice full of sincerity. "I think we needed this. I needed this. I've been a terrible sister, and I've been so selfish. But I'm really trying to be better. I don't want to mess this up." I looked at her, feeling a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. I nodded, unable to keep the smile off my face. "I know, Lila, and I'm proud of you. I really am." She looked at me, her expression soft. "Thanks, Nova. You know, I've been thinking about it. I think, for the first time, I really see how much you've done. I'm sorry it took me so long to notice." I could feel the sincerity in her words, and I realized that we were no longer the same people we had been just a few weeks ago. We had both grown, her in learning to appreciate me, and me in learning to stand up for myself and take control of my own life. As we sat there, watching the credits roll, I realized something else, something more profound than anything I had anticipated. The conflict that had once defined our relationship was no longer the driving force in my life. I was no longer defined by the tension between us. I was defined by my ability to take control, to set boundaries, and to never let anyone take me for granted again. That realization alone was worth more than any apology or acknowledgement. The truth was, I had taken back my power that night when I stood up to her. And though it hadn't been easy, though there were bumps along the way, it was a choice I'd made. And now I knew that I wasn't just doing it for Lila. I was doing it for myself. "Maybe this isn't perfect, but it's real," I said softly, leaning back on the couch, content with where we were. Lila nodded. "Yeah, I think this is as real as it gets." The world didn't always work out the way we expected. Relationships weren't always perfect. But the important thing was learning how to stand up for yourself, how to be honest about your feelings, and how to demand the respect you deserve, no matter the circumstances. Life was messy, but that didn't mean I had to stay stuck in the mess. I could choose to rise above it. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing just that. If you've enjoyed this story and the lessons it brings, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of this journey. Turn on notifications to stay updated on future stories and life lessons that will inspire you to take control of your own narrative. Remember, you have the power to stand up for yourself, to demand respect, and to never let anyone make you feel less than you truly are. It's never too late to take control and to change your story.